My parents spent my entire childhood pretending I didn't exist while worshiping the ground my mediocre brother walked on. In this story of family betrayal, they came crawling back, begging me to save our crumbling family estate, and I realized it was the perfect opportunity for revenge and justice to make sure they never forgot my name again. My name is Aurora Johnson, and for the first 18 years of my life, I was a ghost haunting the hallways of my own home. To understand why I did what I did, you have to understand the house. It wasn't just a building, it was the Johnson ancestral seat, a sprawling Georgian-style mansion sitting on 50 acres of prime Virginia countryside. It had 14 bedrooms, a ballroom that had hosted senators and oil tycoons, and a history that my parents, Richard and Eleanor, valued more than their own souls, and certainly more than their daughter. Growing up, the family dynamic was painfully simple. There was the heir, and then there was the spare. My brother, Caleb, was 2 years older than me and the center of my parents' universe. He was the golden boy, the one destined to carry on the Johnson name, the one whose mediocrity was polished until it looked like brilliance. I, on the other hand, was Aurora, the quiet one, the one who liked to draw, the one who didn't matter. I remember my 10th birthday vividly. I had spent weeks dropping hints that I wanted a specific set of drafting pencils. I was obsessed with sketching buildings even back then. When the morning came, I walked into the breakfast nook, my heart fluttering with that foolish, childish hope that maybe this year would be different. My mother was reading the society pages. My father was on a call. Caleb was shoving pancakes into his mouth. No one looked up. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered, mostly to myself. My mother glanced over the top of her reading glasses, looking annoyed. "Oh, is that today? We're very busy, Aurora. Caleb has a tennis match. We need to leave in 20 minutes. There were no pencils. There was no cake. That evening, after they returned from celebrating Caleb's loss, which they framed as a moral victory because the referee was biased, they handed me a generic card with a $50 bill inside. They hadn't even signed it. Contrast this with Caleb's 16th birthday. They bought him a brand new convertible, they threw a party that cost more than most people's college tuition, he crashed the car 2 weeks later while driving drunk. My parents didn't punish him, they blamed the manufacturer of the car for faulty brakes and bought him a new one. That was the pattern. Caleb failed and they built him a safety net of gold. I succeeded and they looked right through me. I threw myself into my studies. It was my only escape. I realized early on that the walls of that mansion were suffocating me, and if I wanted to breathe, I had to build my own world. I graduated valedictorian of my high school class. My parents didn't attend the ceremony because Caleb was having a crisis. His girlfriend had dumped him, and he needed emotional support. I left for college the next morning. I got a full scholarship to a prestigious architecture program in Europe. I packed my life into 2 suitcases, left a note on the kitchen counter, and walked out the heavy oak front doors without looking back. Over the next 15 years, I rebuilt myself. I stopped being the invisible Aurora Johnson and became A. Johnson, the visionary architect. I worked in London, Tokyo, and New York. I designed sustainable skyscrapers that pierced the clouds and community centers that breathed life into forgotten neighborhoods. I won the Pritzker Prize before I turned 35. My face was on the cover of magazines that sat on coffee tables in penthouses I had designed. I kept my distance from my family. We spoke perhaps once a year, usually a brief, chilly call on Christmas, where my mother would talk about Caleb's latest venture and never ask about my life. I knew Caleb was struggling. He bounced from failed business idea to failed business idea, bankrolled entirely by my parents, a craft brewery that made undrinkable beer, a tech startup with no code, a crypto investment that went to zero. I watched from afar as the Johnson fortune, which had seemed infinite when I was a child, began to bleed out. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in my firm's headquarters in Chicago, looking over blueprints for a new museum in Berlin, when my personal assistant buzzed me. "Aurora, it's your mother. She says it's an emergency." I stared at the phone. My mother never called. If she was calling, someone was dead or the world was ending.
If you are enjoying the story, please like and subscribe. Also, please comment, as your feedback helps to improve the stories coming.
I picked up. "Hello, Mother?" "Aurora." Her voice was thin, trembling in a way I had never heard before. "We need you to come home. Is it Father? Is he ill?" "No, he's fine physically. It's the house, Aurora. It's the estate. We're losing it." The story came out in jagged, tearful fragments. Over the years, to fund Caleb's disasters and maintain their lavish lifestyle without any actual income, my parents had leveraged the estate. They had taken out second and third mortgages. They had sold off the antique furniture, the art, the stocks. Now the bank was foreclosing. The roof was caving in. The foundation was cracking. The historic commission was threatening fines for negligence. They were facing total ruin, not just bankruptcy, but public humiliation. The Johnsons, homeless and disgraced. "Why are you calling me?" I asked, my voice steady despite the shock. "Because you're an architect," she said, as if that explained everything. "You're famous, you have money, you can save it." She didn't ask how I was. She didn't congratulate me on my recent awards. She just needed a wallet and a contractor. I almost hung up. I should have hung up. But then a thought crystallized in my mind, a dark, cold, beautiful thought. If I saved the house, I would be the one in control.
For the first time in my life, I would hold the cards. "I'll come and take a look," I said, "but I'm not promising anything." Returning to the estate was like walking into a mausoleum. The driveway, once lined with manicured hedges, was overgrown with weeds. The paint on the massive columns was peeling like sunburned skin. The grand fountain in the courtyard was dry and filled with dead leaves. My parents were waiting at the door. They looked older, smaller. My father's suit was frayed at the cuffs. My mother's hair, usually dyed a fierce chestnut, was showing streaks of gray. And there was Caleb. He was 37 years old, but he looked like a bloated teenager. He was wearing sweatpants and a stained t-shirt, holding a beer at 2 in the afternoon. "Aurora," he shouted, grinning as if we were best friends. "The prodigal sister returns. Look at you, all fancy." I ignored him and looked at the house. It was worse than I imagined. The smell of mildew hit me the moment I stepped into the foyer. There were buckets catching water from the ceiling. The grand staircase, the centerpiece of the home, had a broken banister. My parents ushered me into the drawing room, one of the few rooms that was still somewhat presentable. "So," my father started, pouring himself a drink with shaking hands, "here's the situation. We need about $4 million to clear the debts and another $3 million to handle the renovations." $7 million? I repeated. "And you want me to just write a check?" "Well, it's family money, isn't it?" Caleb chimed in, slouching on the sofa. "You're rich now. It's only fair you help out." I looked at him. "Fair? I haven't taken a dime from this family since I was 18. You've drained them dry." Now, let's not bicker," my mother said nervously. "Aurora, darling, think of the legacy. This house has been in the Johnson family for 4 generations. We can't let it fall to strangers." I walked to the window and looked out at the overgrown gardens. I thought about the little girl who wasn't allowed to play on the grass because she might ruin the view. I thought about the pencils I never got. "I have a proposal," I said, turning back to face them. "Anything," my father said. "I will pay off the debts, all of them, and I will personally oversee and fund the restoration of the mansion.
I will restore it to a glory it hasn't seen in 50 years. It will be my masterpiece." My parents' faces lit up with relief. My mother actually clapped her hands. "Oh, thank God! I knew we could count on you." "However," I continued, cutting through their celebration, "there are conditions." "Conditions?" Caleb narrowed his eyes. "First, I require total creative control. No one tells me what tile to use, what walls to knock down. I am the architect. You are the occupants." "Agreed, agreed," my father said, dismissively. "Second, since I am putting up the capital, the title of the property needs to be transferred out of your names." The room went silent. "Transferred?" my father asked, his voice dropping. "To whom?" "To a holding company," I lied smoothly. "It's for tax purposes. If I'm pouring millions into this, I need to write it off as a business investment. If it stays a private residence in your names, the gift tax alone would bankrupt you again. The company will own the deed, but the debt will be gone." "And we still live here?" my mother asked. "We will work out a residency agreement," I said, "but the ownership changes. It's the only way the numbers work." They exchanged looks. They were desperate. They were terrified of the bank taking the keys within the month. They didn't have a choice, and they knew it. But more importantly, they were arrogant. They assumed that because I was their daughter, the good daughter who had finally come home, I was doing this for them. They assumed the holding company was just a formality. "Fine," my father said. "Get the papers drawn up." "And one last thing," I added. "Caleb needs to move out during the renovations. It's a liability issue." "What?" Caleb shouted. "Where am I supposed to go?" "I've rented a nice apartment in town for you," I said. "It's paid for 6 months. After that, you're on your own. You're nearly 40, Caleb. It's time." My parents started to protest, but I held up a hand. "Deal breakers. Take it or leave it." They took it. The legal process was swift. I hired the best lawyers in Chicago to draft the transfer. The deed to the Johnson estate was signed over to the A.J. Restoration Trust. My parents signed the documents without reading the fine print, too busy fantasizing about their return to high society. They saw the word trust and assumed it meant they were safe. They didn't realize that I was the sole trustee, the sole beneficiary, and the sole decision-maker. Once the ink was dry, the work began. I moved into the guest cottage on the edge of the property and brought in my own team. For the next 14 months, the estate was a war zone of scaffolding, cement mixers, and carpenters. I didn't just fix the house, I transformed it. I stripped away the tacky additions my parents had made in the 80s. I restored the original Georgian molding. I opened up the floor plan to let the light in, the light that had been denied to me for so long. My parents were staying in a rental I provided nearby, but they visited the site constantly. They would strut around in hard hats, pointing at things and talking about how wonderful it would be to host Christmas parties again. "Make sure the ballroom floor is reinforced," my mother told me one day. "We're planning a massive gala for the reopening. We're going to invite the governor. Everyone needs to know the Johnsons are back." I just nodded. Oh, they'll know, I thought. Caleb came by occasionally, usually to complain about his apartment or ask for money. He would walk through the framed-out rooms and talk about which bedroom would be his. "I'm thinking the East Wing Suite," he said, chewing gum loudly. "It gets the morning sun. And I want a jacuzzi in the bathroom, Aurora. Don't cheap out on me." I smiled a tight, razor-thin smile. "I'll keep that in mind, Caleb." As the renovation neared completion, the buzz began to build. The architectural world was watching. "Aurora Johnson's Personal Passion Project," the headlines read, "a historic restoration of the Johnson estate." My parents basked in the reflected glory. They gave interviews to local papers, spinning a narrative about how they had commissioned their brilliant daughter to modernize the family home. They were delusional. They truly believed that once the final coat of paint was dry, I would hand them the keys, bow my head, and fade back into the background, leaving them with a $10 million asset they hadn't paid for. They began planning the Grand Reveal Gala. They sent out embossed invitations to the cream of Virginia society: senators, judges, old money families, the press. They spent money they didn't have on catering and decorations, assuming they could just bill it to my trust. I let them. I let them build the stage for their own execution. The night of the gala arrived. The estate looked breathtaking. I had installed landscape lighting that made the limestone facade glow against the night sky. The fountain was flowing with crystal clear water. The driveway was packed with Bentleys and Mercedes. I wore a black dress, simple and sharp as a knife. I stood in the shadows of the ballroom, watching my parents work the room. They were in their element. My father was holding court with a scotch in hand, laughing loudly. My mother was dripping in rented jewelry, accepting compliments on her home. Caleb was there, of course, wearing a tuxedo that was slightly too tight, bragging to a group of young women about how he was going to turn the carriage house into a recording studio. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the sound of a string quartet. It was the perfect picture of success. It was the lie they had always wanted to live. At 8 o'clock, the music stopped. My father tapped a spoon against his glass. The room went silent. "Friends, family, distinguished guests," he boomed, his face flushed with pride and alcohol. "Welcome back to the Johnson estate." Applause rippled through the crowd. "It has been a difficult year," he continued, feigning humility, "but like the phoenix, we have risen, and we have to thank our daughter, Aurora, for her assistance in polishing this gem. But make no mistake, the heart of this house is the family that inhabits it. This house is a legacy that will pass to my son Caleb and his children, ensuring the Johnson name endures for centuries." He gestured for Caleb to come up. Caleb jogged up the steps, raising his hands like a prize fighter. My mother dabbed a fake tear from her eye. "And now," my father said, "let us unveil the commemorative plaque that will hang in the foyer, marking this new chapter of Johnson history." This was it. This was the moment. I stepped out of the shadows. I walked up the stairs to the stage. My father looked a bit confused, but smiled and handed me the microphone, expecting me to say something humble and grateful. "Thank you, Father," I said, my voice amplified, echoing off the high ceilings I had lovingly restored. "It is indeed a new chapter." I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the people who had ignored me when I was a child. I saw the neighbors who knew my parents were broke but pretended otherwise. "When I took on this project," I continued, "I thought a lot about what a home means. A home is a place of safety, a place of growth, a place where children are nurtured, not neglected." My mother's smile faltered slightly. She sensed the shift in tone. "Growing up here, I didn't always feel that," I said. "I was the invisible child. I was the one who wasn't worth a set of pencils, while my brother was given the world on a platter." A murmur went through the crowd. My father reached for the microphone, but I stepped away. "But I believe in redemption," I said louder. "I believe that this house, which saw so much coldness, can be a source of warmth. My parents asked me to save this estate, and I have, but not for them." I signaled to the tech crew. The velvet curtain behind me, covering the massive new signage, dropped. The letters were gold, 2 feet tall, illuminated by spotlights. The Aurora Johnson Foundation Center for Underprivileged Youth and Arts Education. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking the air out of my parents' lungs. My father turned around, read the sign, and turned back to me, his face draining of all color. "What is this? Is this a joke?" I turned back to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to announce that as of today, this estate is the permanent headquarters of my new charity. It will serve as a boarding school and arts academy for talented children from low-income backgrounds, children who have potential but no support, children who need to be seen." I pointed to the doors. The waiters who had been circulating with trays set them down. They weren't waiters. They were the first class of students and staff I had hired. They began to applaud. My parents stood frozen. Caleb looked like he had been hit with a shovel. "The deed to this property," I said, driving the final nail in, "is held by the foundation. It is an irrevocable trust. The restoration was designed specifically for this purpose. The bedrooms upstairs are dormitories. The carriage house is not a recording studio for Caleb. It is a library and computer lab." I looked at my parents. "You wanted the Johnson name to be remembered? Now it will be. It will be remembered for generosity, for art, for helping those who actually need it, not for hoarding wealth you didn't earn." The crowd erupted, not the polite applause of the elite, but the genuine, shocked excitement of the press and the younger guests. The reporters were flashing their cameras frantically. I had framed it as a massive philanthropic act. If my parents argued against it now, in front of the cameras, they would look like monsters trying to steal from orphans. I had checkmated them in front of the entire state. The rest of the night was a blur of flashes and handshakes. I was surrounded by donors and journalists. My parents and Caleb were escorted off the stage by security, my security. The confrontation happened an hour later in the library. I walked in to find my father pouring a drink, but the bottle was empty. My mother was sobbing on a love seat. Caleb was pacing, red-faced. Caleb screamed when I walked in, "You stole our house! You stole my inheritance!" I didn't raise my voice. I sat down in the leather armchair, my armchair, and pulled a folder from my bag. "I didn't steal anything," I said calmly. "You signed it over. Here is the contract. Section 4, paragraph B, the trustee reserves the right to designate the final usage of the property for any charitable or residential purpose deemed appropriate." You signed it, Richard. You signed it, Eleanor. We thought, my father stammered, "we thought you were family." "I was family," I said coldly, "when I was 10 and wanted pencils, when I was 18 and left alone. But you made it very clear that family is a transactional concept to you, so I made a transaction." "You can't do this," my mother wailed. "Where will we live? We have nothing." I slid 3 envelopes across the table. "I'm not a monster," I said. "I've purchased a condo for you in Florida. It's 2 bedrooms, nice view of a golf course. The deed is in your name, fully paid off. And there is a stipend, $5,000 a month. Enough to live comfortably, but not enough to live like this." "And me?" Caleb demanded. "What do I get?" I looked at him with pity. "You get a job application, Caleb. The foundation needs a janitor. I'm willing to give you a chance to earn a living for the first time in your life. Or you can go to Florida and sleep on Mom and Dad's couch. Your choice." He lunged at me, but my security guard stepped out from the shadows of the book stacks and blocked him. Caleb crumpled. The realization hit him. The party was over. The free ride was dead. My parents left the next morning. They tried to sue, of course. They found a lawyer who was willing to take the case, claiming I had defrauded them, but the paperwork was ironclad. And the public opinion? It was entirely on my side. Who sends a charity for underprivileged kids to court? Who tries to evict budding artists so they can have a mansion for 3 people? The press crucified them. They dropped the lawsuit within weeks and moved to Florida. I hear from them occasionally. My mother complains about the humidity and the neighbors. Caleb lives with them, working odd jobs and blaming the world for his misfortune. They are miserable, but they are alive and they are housed, which is more than they deserved. As for me, I live in the guest cottage. I wake up every morning and walk across the lawn to the main house. I hear music coming from the ballroom, not a string quartet for rich snobs, but a scholarship student learning the cello. I see kids sketching in the gardens where I used to hide. The house is alive. It's noisy, it's messy, and it's full of hope. My parents wanted me to save the Johnson reputation, and I did. The Johnson name is now associated with one of the most prestigious arts foundations in the country. They got exactly what they asked for. They just forgot that when you ask an architect to build something, you should probably check the blueprints first. My name is Aurora Johnson. I was the invisible child. Now I'm the only one anyone sees. If you believe the truth always finds a way out, like the video and please comment and subscribe if you enjoyed the story and want more revenge stories where betrayal meets consequences. Your feedback helps to improve the videos.